Have you ever kept a family secret for decades? I won't ask what, just curious.
My family skipped my art exhibit opening. I can still hear myself saying those words out loud because it feels unreal even now, like I somehow imagined the entire thing. But the truth is that when the lights dimmed and the host announced my name, the chairs I had saved in the front row for my parents, my brother and my sister were sitting there empty, glowing like an accusation I never asked for. I had spent months preparing, pouring everything I had into that show, reminding them a dozen times, printing invitations, texting, calling, even double-checking with each of them just the day before, and every single one of them swore they would be there. I told myself they would be proud, that they'd finally see what I had been fighting for all these years, but when it mattered, they were nowhere to be found. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely comes as a surprise. It's usually a confirmation of something you already suspected but didn't want to admit. I knew deep down that my family never really took my art seriously, not as a career, not as something worth showing up for. My brother's promotions, my sister's endless social gatherings, my parents' obsession with who looked good in the neighborhood newsletter, those things always mattered more. I always came second, or third, or not at all, and every holiday dinner was just another reminder. But still, some part of me kept clinging to the idea that this night would be different, that blood ties had to mean something when I finally had a stage of my own. So when the journalists asked me where my family was, when photographers turned their lenses not just on my canvases but on me, waiting for the proud family members who never arrived, the shame washed over me in a way I cannot even fully describe. I tried to smile, to play along, but then I felt this anger build up, not just at them but at myself for expecting anything else. And that's when it happened. I locked eyes with the biggest camera in front of me, and instead of pretending, instead of covering for them yet again, I opened my mouth and said the words that would change everything. For those who didn't show, don't pretend you care now. The room went so still you could hear someone drop a glass in the corner. I remember finishing the night in a daze, shaking hands, thanking people, answering polite questions, but inside I was vibrating with something between fury and relief. Fury because my family had humiliated me in front of everyone, but relief because I had finally said out loud what I had been biting back for years. I didn't even check my phone when I got home. I tossed it on the table and stared at the ceiling, still tasting the bitterness of that line in my mouth. For once, I hadn't protected them, hadn't smoothed things over, hadn't tried to make everyone believe we were the picture of support and unity. For once, I chose me. By morning, I realized just how far those words had traveled. My call log wasn't a list, it was a wall. Missed calls from mom, from dad, from my brother, my sister, even a couple of extended relatives I hadn't heard from in months. All of them apparently found their phones in record time after failing to find their way to my show. And mixed in with those calls were messages from friends saying they'd seen clips on social media, articles quoting me in the local arts column, even a radio segment replaying the audio. That one sentence, raw and unpolished, had struck a chord, not just because it was true for me, but because anyone watching had probably lived some version of it themselves, the people who are supposed to show up for you, who don't. As I sat there, staring at the wall of missed calls, I felt the knot in my chest start to untangle in the strangest way. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't overreacting, I wasn't too sensitive. They really had let me down, and now the whole world could see it. For years I had been gaslit into thinking I was making mountains out of molehills, that I was imagining slights, that I was the difficult one. But here was the proof, undeniable and public. They chose not to come, and I chose not to cover for them. And that's where everything began to shift. Because once you let the truth out into the open, once you stop playing along with the script that keeps you small, you can't take it back. They would call and they would beg and they would spin excuses. I knew that was coming, but nothing would erase that camera moment. They had failed me, I had called them out, and for once, the story wasn't theirs to control. It was mine. And I was only just beginning to realize how powerful that could be. By the time I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table that morning, the clip had already slipped out of my control because people were resharing it in places I did not even know existed. And what hit me first was not pride or panic, but this strange quiet inside my chest, like the part of me that always ran around putting out fires had finally set the hose down and taken a breath, because I did not owe anyone a soft landing anymore. The call log kept refreshing with new missed calls from my mom, and then my dad, and then my brother, followed by my sister who sent a voice message that started with her calling me by a pet name she only uses when she wants something. And then the family group chat lit up with a flood of excuses that read like a bingo card we have all seen before, because my dad said there was traffic, and my mom said the sitter canceled for a neighbor who is not even her responsibility, and my brother said he had a work thing that ran late, while my sister tried the line about how she thought the opening started an hour later, which would be funny if it did not hurt so much after all the reminders and confirmations and calendar invites I sent. What I noticed, more than the lies, was the tone underneath them, a tone I know too well because I was raised on it, where the point is not accountability but image control. Like if they talk fast enough and soft enough and long enough, then maybe I will apologize for making things awkward. And it was jarring to realize that even now, when the whole mess was playing on strangers' phones, they still thought the problem was my mouth, not their absence. So I put my phone on the table and let it buzz while I opened my laptop, because if they wanted to talk about image, then fine, I would talk about it too, but on my page, in my words, without filters or half-truths. I posted a single photo taken by a friend, a shot of the front row from last night with the 3 empty chairs and the little place cards that said reserved. And I wrote that I would keep it simple because I was done writing essays to people who loved the sound of apologies, but not the work of making things right, and then I told the truth the way you say it when you are tired of being careful. That strangers came and cheered and asked thoughtful questions and bought art, and that the people who raised me did not show, and that I was no longer interested in playing family publicist while swallowing the cost, and right under that I added something that felt like a tiny act of repair for the kid I used to be, because I announced that I was giving away 3 sign prints to 3 attendees who told me they came alone because the people who should have supported them did not, and that they should send me their stories so I could pick them by the end of the week, and I hit post before I could second guess myself. Within minutes, the comments started rolling in, not the empty kind, but the kind that recognizes its own reflection. People telling me about graduations where no one clapped for them, or recitals where the only person in the crowd was a neighbor, or small business openings where family showed up the next day for photos, but not the first day for sweat, and it was overwhelming and grounding at the same time because I realized I had not just burned a bridge, I had walked across it first, and on the other side were people who had been waiting with water and chairs, and the kind of applause that comes without conditions. That is when my mom switched tactics and called to say that I had humiliated the family, which made me laugh in that tired way where the laugh carries years of old arguments. Because what she meant was that I had humiliated the version of our family she likes to display when it suits her, and I told her calmly that I had said one sentence, that I had not named anyone, that I had not even told the full story of all the ways I learned to shrink to keep the peace, and that if she wanted me to protect a reputation, then she should have started by protecting me, and she hung up with a sharp breath like she was the one being wronged. So I did something I never do, because the peacemaker in me always worries about looking cruel, but I am done babysitting adults who know exactly what they are doing. And I turned off read receipts in the family chat, so they could unload their paragraphs into the void without the satisfaction of knowing I was reading them. And I pinned a new post to my profile that thanked every person who came and tagged the gallery and highlighted the names of 2 local art teachers who brought students, and I wrote that the next set of tickets for my live studio tour would be reserved first for the people who showed up on opening night, which was a clean little blade wrapped in gratitude, and I watched the RSVP link fill with the same names I had hugged the night before. The phone kept buzzing on the table like a trapped wasp, but then one name flashed across the screen and made my stomach tighten in a familiar way, because I was not expecting my dad to call that early, and he never calls without rehearsing. And something in me knew this was going to be different, so I let it ring and ring until it stopped, and a few seconds later it lit up again with the same name, and I could feel the next move arriving like a freight train, because if he was calling twice in A row, he was not calling to apologize, he was calling to put the fire back in my hands, and I picked up and put him on speaker without saying hello. The line clicked, and before I could even take a breath, my dad's voice came through, sharp and clipped like he had already been rehearsing it all morning, the way he always did when he wanted control of the conversation before I could open my mouth. He did not start with hello or with anything that sounded like concern. He went straight into this practiced monologue about how disappointed he was in me for embarrassing the family, how my words were reckless, how I had made him and Mom look like they did not care, and how people at his office were now whispering about how his daughter had dragged her own blood in front of cameras. I sat there with the phone on speaker, staring at the table, feeling that familiar twist in my stomach that I knew too well, because this was not new. This was the same script he had always used, where the real offense was not what they did, but that I dared to shine a light on it. What struck me most, though, was how quickly his tone shifted once he realized I was not jumping in with my usual apologies. He tried guilt first, going on about how much money they had spent on me growing up, how much sacrifice they had made to give me opportunities, as if the basic act of raising your child was some debt I should never stop repaying. When guilt did not land, he turned to anger, raising his voice, accusing me of biting the hand that fed me, reminding me of every holiday he thought I had ruined by being too sensitive, and warning me that family reputation was a fragile thing I should not play games with. He threw around words like ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. I did not yell back. I did not even interrupt. Instead, I let him talk himself into circles while my friend, who had been sitting across from me, quietly lifted her phone and hit record. I had not planned it. I had not staged some grand setup, but in that moment it just clicked that people needed to hear the way this sounded, unfiltered, because it was always my word against theirs, and I was always painted as the problem. I sat still and let him go on, even as he sneered about how artists are parasites, about how I should have gotten a real job instead of chasing attention, about how he and Mom had better things to do than sit in a gallery clapping for me like trained seals. Every word burned, but every word also confirmed exactly what I had been trying to tell myself for years. It was never about love or support. It was about control and appearance. By the time he hung up, my face felt hot, but my voice was steady, and I looked at my friend and said, "People need to hear this." She nodded like she had been waiting for me to say it. That night, I did something I never thought I would do. I sent the recording to one of the bloggers who had already written about my exhibit, a writer known for exposing hypocrisy in local politics and schools. Within hours, the audio was clipped, shared, and suddenly the narrative was no longer just me claiming neglect, it was his own voice proving every word I had said. He had outed himself without even realizing it. The backlash was instant. My siblings blew up my phone, accusing me of ruining Dad's reputation, of taking something private and dragging it into the street, of being vindictive. My sister left a voicemail full of tears, telling me she could never show her face at her office again because people were whispering about how cold our family sounded. My brother sent texts full of half threats, half pleas, saying I had no idea what I had done, that this was going to follow us for years. They wanted me to panic, to feel guilty, to scramble to undo it. But I did not. For once in my life, I felt no panic, no guilt, only clarity. They had played this game for years, telling me my pain was exaggeration, my needs were drama, my voice was too loud. Now they had said it themselves, recorded and undeniable, and no amount of spin could bury it. Of course, the comments online were brutal for them, because people recognized the patterns, people pointed out the emotional manipulation, the obsession with image, the dismissal of a child's passion, and it was like a dam breaking. Strangers were telling stories in the comments that sounded just like mine, echoing back every holiday argument, every minimization, every guilt trip they had endured in their own families. It was bigger than me now, and maybe that was why I did not feel small anymore. And here is the part that still makes my hands shake. After all the accusations, after all the finger-pointing, I realized I had not even told half of what I could tell. The recording was only one piece. I had texts, messages, stories they prayed would stay buried. And in that moment, I saw the terror behind their anger, not fear for me, but fear for themselves, fear that I might let the rest spill. I did not say it then, but I knew I was holding cards they never wanted on the table. That night, as I sat scrolling through the storm of reactions, a thought settled into me like a stone in water. If they thought this was the worst of it, they had no idea what was coming next. Because my sister, with her polished image and her habit of putting me down whenever she could, had no clue that the next move was already lined up, waiting for me to drop it. And the truth is, I was done playing defense. It was time to go on offense, and I knew exactly where to start. By the afternoon, the noise had shifted from outrage to strategy because my sister went from crying voicemails about how I had destroyed our father's good name to this careful public tone that she uses when she wants to look generous without doing anything that costs her. And she posted that she supports all artists and that miscommunications happen, which would have been funny if it were not so familiar, because for years she called my work a hobby and a phase, and then turned around and asked for pieces to hang in her new office because it would be good exposure, and the worst part is that I gave her two, not because I owed her but because I was tired of arguing and I wanted peace. And I kept the emails and the messages and even the delivery sign-off because I knew this moment might come and I was done being empty-handed when the gaslighting started. I had already scheduled a live studio Q&A for the people who actually showed up on opening night, the same people I thanked in my posts that morning, and when the stream went live and the chat filled with names I recognized from the guest list, I felt that steady calm that comes when you realize your audience is built from people you chose, so I welcomed them and talked about the work and the process and the way support looks different when it is real versus when it is performative, and then, because I believe in clarity, I said that if anyone here has ever had family ask for freebies after dismissing their career, I see you. And I pulled up a screenshot with the names blurred where my sister had written that my canvases would look great in conference rooms and that I should be honored to be included since she could shout me out at the next team meeting. And I read the part where I replied that I do this for a living and that friends and family do not pay with exposure. And the chat lit up with that quiet fury people carry when they have been talked down to for years. Before the stream, I had done one more thing that felt both petty and righteous, and I am not going to pretend it did not give me satisfaction because it absolutely did. Since I drafted a formal invoice addressed to her company's accounts payable for the two pieces they had been enjoying for months, with clear licensing language and late fees written out in plain English, and I copied the office manager and compliance, because her firm has a policy about receiving gifts over a certain value and we both know those policy trainings are not optional, and the subject line said art loan concluding, return or remit, which is the most polite way I could phrase either pay me or give them back, and I pressed send with a small smile and then went live. During the stream, someone asked what I planned to do if they refused to pay, and I said calmly that art is work and work is not free, and that I had already scheduled a pickup with building security for the end of the week if payment did not arrive, and that the pieces would then be auctioned with the proceeds funding studio tour tickets and supply stipends for 3 young artists who do not have family support to lean on, and the chat exploded in the best possible way because people like solutions more than chaos, and I could feel the mood turning from sympathy to power, which is exactly where I wanted it because pity has never built anything for me, and I am not taking it now. My mother called midstream and I let it ring because I was not going to interrupt my own event to absorb another guilt lecture about unity. And after I ended the session, I played her voicemail where she said that family issues should stay private and that I was risking permanent fractures for the sake of attention. And I sat there with the phone in my hand and finally said the sentence I had avoided for years. That privacy is not a shield for bad behavior and unity is not a hostage note, and if she wanted peace, then she should start by not rewriting history every time it inconvenienced her. An hour after the invoice went out, I received a clipped email from a compliance officer asking for clarification on the delivery date and the terms of the loan, which told me everything I needed to know about how quickly the conversation had jumped from personal to professional, and I replied with the signed delivery photo and the email chain and a friendly note about pickup availability. And then I posted a short update to my followers thanking them for the flood of stories and promising that The auction, if it happened, would be transparent and community-focused, because I want people to see that you can defend your boundaries without turning into the villain they always warned you would be. By evening, my sister texted a long paragraph about legal action and defamation, and how I was sabotaging her career. And I answered with one sentence that said I could either send a revised invoice with a friends and family discount or send a cart to collect the art, and 30 minutes later an unfamiliar number emailed asking for wiring instructions, which I forwarded to my gallery with a note that if funds cleared, we would mark the pieces as corporate acquisitions, and if not, we would stick to the pickup plan. And then I put my phone face down because I had done enough for one day, and the next move was already forming in my mind. The gallery from the bigger city had called earlier and left a message saying my name was everywhere and asking whether I could open with a short talk about support and boundaries at their upcoming group show. And as I listened to it again, I knew exactly how I wanted to use that stage, because if my family wanted to stand beside me only when the cameras were rolling, I was going to make sure the cameras captured something they could not spin or soften. And all I had to decide now was whether to save them seats or leave them empty on purpose and let the whole room notice. The gallery in the bigger city felt like a test I had been heading toward without knowing it, because the invitation was short and polite and very clear that they wanted my voice as much as my canvases, and I decided right then that I was done being reactive. That this time I would set the terms before anyone else tried to define me, so I met with the curator. I laid out the plan for the talk, and I asked for something small that meant everything, which was a short list printed in the program that thanked the people who had shown up on my first night by name, while everyone else, no matter their last name or blood relation, would be listed only as general attendees. And the curator nodded with that look people have when they understand that a boundary is not drama, it is a map. The week moved like a slow march because my phone never stopped buzzing, and every message sounded like a different kind of bait, with my mother leaning on family unity, my father warning me about what I was doing to our good name, my sister insisting that compliance had overreacted and that I had made her look like a villain, while my brother tried the classic all sides made mistakes line as if we were at a board meeting and not talking about a night where I stood alone in front of cameras, pretending not to notice a row of empty chairs I had set with my own hands. And through all of that noise, I kept doing the work, because the wire cleared, the gallery invoice marked paid, and I sat down and drafted the announcement for a small fund for young artists who could not count on family support, naming it the Showed Up Fund, which made me laugh in the quiet way you do when a joke grows a spine and stands up. On the day of the talk, I sent a single text to the family group chat that said I would not be meeting before or after the event, that I would not be posing for family photos, that any apology would need to be written and sent privately without public performance attached, and that they could choose to attend like anyone else, or they could choose to sit this one out. And the typing bubbles appeared and disappeared like warning lights, then went silent, which told me more than any paragraph could have told me, because people who care more about the photo than the person rarely show up when the flash is not guaranteed. The room filled early, and I recognized the faces from the first night: the teacher who had hauled students in a borrowed van, the neighbor who had come alone because her own kids told her she was being silly, the barista who saved tips for a ticket and cried when she saw the piece that looked like the memory she never tells anyone. And when I stepped to the small podium, I realized that the speech I had written was not a speech at all. It was a conversation with the kid I used to be, the one who kept asking for permission to be taken seriously. So I told the room that support is not a statement. It is a body in a chair when it counts, a hand on a shoulder when it hurts, a wallet opened without the word exposure attached to it. And the room went quiet in that good way where people are not waiting to clap, they are waiting to breathe. I thanked the gallery, and I thanked every person who had shown up by reading the names from the back of the program, and I closed the talk by announcing the little fund with the not-so-little name, promising that the first grants would go to 3 young artists nominated by the people in that room who had already proven what showing up looks like. And when the applause started, I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket like a trapped insect, which meant the group chat had found the live stream, and I let it ring against my leg and did not reach for it because the choice I had been circling for years had already been made. After the talk, a reporter asked if I wanted a photo with my family since they were standing in the back near the exit, and I smiled at the kindness in the question and said that there would be a group photo with the founding supporters of the fund, that the list was printed in the program, and that anyone on that page was welcome in the shot. And when the photographer lined us up, I watched a path open in the crowd for the teacher, for the neighbor, for the barista, for the gallery tech who had stayed late to adjust lights on my first night, and I watched the other faces stay where they were, still and uncomfortable, not excluded by force, but by the simple math of who had been there when it mattered. The story could end there and it would be enough, but the last move did not happen on a stage. It happened later that night when I sat on my couch with my shoes still on and scrolled through the new wall of missed calls and read the long message my mother finally sent. A message full of almost apologies and careful phrasing about misunderstandings and hurt feelings on all sides, and I typed a reply that was shorter than anything I had said in days yet heavier than any speech, telling her that I believed in repair and in second chances, that I would read any apology sent without public posts attached, that real change is measured in future attendance and not in future photos, and that I was not shutting the door, I was just moving the handle to my side. I hit send, I turned the phone face down, and for the first time in a very long time I felt that click in my chest that happens when you put the final piece of a puzzle into place, because I had not burned my family to the ground. I had built a boundary and lit it like a runway, and if they ever decide to land on it, they will know exactly where to put their feet, and until then the cameras and the stages and the rooms and the chairs are mine to fill with people who understand that care is not a word you call after the show, it is the seat you take in the front row before it starts.